Wanted to start to introduce um, Yogesh Kumar, who is a Solano County Master Gardener, and he's agreed. He doesn't really know what he got into yet, but he's agreed to sort of coordinate this project for next year. So we're certainly planning to continue. Yogesh, you want to say hi? Is he out there?
Thanks, Mike, and hi everyone. I'm super excited to join the team. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you very much, Yogesh. So Yogesh has got some new ideas and certainly some technical skills that I don't have. So hopefully we'll be able to move this forward. Um, all right. So today, Treva Valentine, who's another Yolo County Master Gardener, and I are going to talk about greenhouses and other season extenders. Those are things such as cold frames and low tunnels and that kind of thing. So we're going into winter. This is, some of the things you can think about using for this year or for next year, and also come spring, and also in the summer for some of the season extension that you can do in the summer for plants that may not really like our hot, dry, at least hot, sunny summers entirely. So, all right, let's see. Okay, so greenhouses certainly come in many shapes and sizes, and you can either build your own, you can buy a kit. There are ways to save money by maybe using less, using used materials or upcycling. So we'll talk about all of that. Um, they come in a lot of sizes. I mean, these are still greenhouses, little kits that you can buy. Again, you could certainly make something that looks like this. So, there's just a lot of options. They don't have to be big, they don't have to be expensive, they don't have to be elaborate to give you, a growing space that is sheltered and a little warmer in the winter. There are also these huge commercial layouts, which are always fun to go into. But obviously, this isn't something in most of our backyards. Um, and again, it's also really fun if you go to a large greenhouse. It's sort of a show place and get an idea of the kind of plants that can be grown inside there that isn't maybe going to be grown outside in the natural environment. So lots of uses. And then after talking about greenhouses, we will talk about some of these ideas, such as low tunnels here and cold frames, and just some other ideas that you can use that are certainly cheaper, easier, but often good enough in our relatively mild climate. So, all right. So what do people use greenhouses for? Well, one thing is for growing flowers, and as you can see, we have orchids and probably a lot of species that wouldn't be doing well outside. So there's certainly people with serious hobbies about growing plants in a greenhouse that they wouldn't be able to grow outside in our temperate climate. So that's one thing. And then also, it's a good place to start plants. So you can start um, your own starts and save, quite a lot of money and have a lot more variety. And a greenhouse gives you a place you can do that out of the house, and in probably a little better environment than just in a south-facing window, which really doesn't give you enough light. So a greenhouse certainly can be a great place to start seedlings. Um, and another thing you can do is you can be growing some vegetables, even summer vegetables that you could extend later into the winter, or maybe get them started earlier. So in a somewhat larger greenhouse, you can actually grow plants in the soil. Doesn't have to be in pots, doesn't have to be up on shelves, if you choose to do that. And the same for, it doesn't have to be vegetables. It could be ornamentals that you're particularly interested in that may not do well in our climate outside. So greenhouse gives you a lot of flexibility. So here are some options. I think most people that have listened to me talk before know that we were up in the foothills for 12 years. So some of these pictures are coming from that period of time. And in fact, I did my Master Gardener training in 2011 in Nevada City. And a lot of these pictures came from a presentation I did with two other Master Gardeners in Nevada City. So a lot of it's not going to look like the Valley, but hopefully a lot of it is transferable to what we have to your backyard and to our valley climate. Um, One of the things I always like to do is ask people, what the structure of these greenhouses were made of. And of course, you're not there, you can't figure it out, but it was trampoline frames. So if you take a trampoline frame and take it apart and put it together a little bit differently, you get a base and hoops. So this was the structure was free and used material that came out of the metal bin, so it was going to get melted down. Um, so, but the other thing, and there's some controversy about this, obviously, is whether or not you would just do a plastic greenhouse. I mean, it's certainly simple, certainly inexpensive. Way to get started. If you're going to do that, you want to use plastic that is UV stabilized, and then it will last maybe 10 years, could even be longer. These were about 10 years by the time we left. And they were still there. So that is, certainly an option. But if you use just regular construction plastic, it'll be gone. It'll be confetti in, a year or two. So you don't want to do that. But there's certainly pros and cons. But this greenhouse here, this was 30 by 40. So, and that vegetable picture was from the inside. And this one was 10 by 20, I think, and we had citrus in here. Mostly citrus does fine here, but, where we are, but it didn't up there. So we were able to grow citrus in pots in this greenhouse, and then this one was mostly vegetables. So just really quick, this is, the inside. Again, we were growing vegetables in an open greenhouse like this, without a lot of shelving and whatnot, gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of growing areas. Um, so we grew some of the winter vegetables on the inside. We extended some of the summer vegetables. It was pretty productive. And then you can grow up, like with the tomatoes, you can put them on strings and grow them up a lot taller than, normally you would outside. So yeah, just real quick. So we had winter vegetables outside, but the ones in the greenhouse certainly did a lot better. And Treva's going to talk a little bit about some of this. But, we started a lot of vegetable starts, mostly vegetables, some ornamentals in the greenhouse. So we were able to start in January, February, well, some things in January, February, or February, March, um, when it was still, freezing at night outside, and none of this would have made it. Now, this is the more diminutive greenhouse that I have now. This one's about 5 by 8. But it was also built with salvaged wood and reused polycarbonate. So, you can do this on, I mean, this was less than $100 to put this together. So you can do it very cheaply if you want, or you can do it, much more elaborately and probably more attractively, but this works for the purpose. I end up covering it with shade cloth in the summertime for just, the late spring here, because there isn't enough venting, and Treva's going to talk about that. But you have to make, I learned something from building this, so we'll pass that on. But again, it's a very useful space, even though it's fairly small. I'm still doing starts in there. Treva's going to talk about lighting. So, there's these two shells give enough space for quite a few starts now. I still have to buy some, but get a lot of them started there. And then I usually will, if I buy tomato plants or start them, then I'll pot them up into bigger pots and let them grow in here for a month or so, and the peppers and the eggplant until I plant them out. And then I put a bed down here afterwards, which right now has kale in it. So I can grow a little bit in here, and just gives an alternative to growing. It's a winter vegetable and it does fine here outside, but it can do a little better. It's kind of an experiment, but it worked last year. So I'm doing it again. I had broccoli in here last year. And this one is a different design. This one happens to be Treva's
Yeah, so let me
greenhouse.
mention a couple of things, Mike.
Yeah, yeah.
So this greenhouse is about, oh man, 25, 28 years old, and I've moved it a couple of times. It's constructed so that I couldn't have roof vents. I can only vent from either end. And so that just doesn't work. And I'll talk about that later. But so I actually took out two windows, the two windows there on the left-hand side, and put in screens. It's not super convenient because putting the windows on and off is kind of a hassle, especially with plants underneath. But so some of these kits aren't perfect for our climate. And I'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about, heating, cooling, venting, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. So, but at any rate, there's an unlimited number of designs. And as Treva has here, a lean house against the house, and we'll show you a couple of others, but lots of options that could work. So here's just, you want to dream a little bit. Here's a few fancier greenhouses. Again, these were from other master gardeners up in Nevada County, that they built them themselves, but very fancy, very nicely done. Both of them had heating inside and ventilation and fans. So give you an idea here of some of the construction. You can get a kit that would pretty much do this if you don't feel that you're quite up to designing and building something like this from scratch. But anyhow, can really be a lot of fun, and it's a great space. And as we were talking before, some of the really nice times is being in a greenhouse when it's raining. I mean, it's just a great space. Or as Tree was saying, even in the wintertime on a sunny day, you can go in there and read a book. Doesn't have to be just growing plants. It can be a nice space for some other activities. So this another greenhouse. Notice here, this vent up here, again, Tree will talk about, would not be enough in our climate. This greenhouse, I think, was shaded. I'm not sure it was enough up there either, to be honest with you. But it was shaded by some trees, it looks like, so that could help. Um, Again, here's a picture inside one of those with, orchids and probably other plants that certainly wouldn't have survived up there, and probably wouldn't even survive here. So just a lot of options to expand your culinary or horticultural interests, and maybe culinary interests too. Just, yeah, lots of different ideas. Okay, questions. I forgot to say put questions in chat, but are there any in there, Joan? Yeah.
Nothing yet.
Okay, well, if anything comes up, sorry I didn't say that. Just put them in and we'll move on. And Treva, it's your turn for.
Okay, so let's talk about temperature control. So cooling a greenhouse, there's two different ways. Passive cooling, like the air vents that Mike's been talking about, and then active, where you have shutters that are controlled, that open at a certain temperature with an exhaust fan. And that actually is how my greenhouse was originally set up. And it was quite obvious, even 25 years ago, that wasn't enough in our climate. Next slide. So these are types of passive cooling, the vents. These actually can come, I think the one on the right actually is temperature regulated, and so it will open on its own. I think the one on the left, it might be a manual, but I'm not positive. So you are going to have something to help control the heat in our environment.
Yeah, and if I was just
well,
going to add the temperature regulated ones, I have in my greenhouse, and they're just a wax cylinder and they expand. So you don't need to have electricity in your greenhouse for it to be an automatic opening vent. So
yes, excellent point. Next slide. So you can also use a swamp cooler. This is kind of a fancier setup than mine. So this swamp cooler is kind of built into the wall. It not only helps cool, but it also helps humidify the air. It circulates the air. You can use it just as a fan to help circulate. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Next slide. And they come with these control panels. So, it monitors the humidity. It can tell the swamp cooler what to do. So this is kind of a fancier way to go, but certainly takes all of the work out of it. You don't have to be home all the time. When I'm using my swamp cooler, I have to be home the whole time. Next slide. So fans, certainly want to place them high in the greenhouse because that's where all the heat is rising to. That's the simplest way. But with the fans, you're going to have some venting, so you can, so you're just not, moving hot air around. You need to bring in some hot air from the outside. And that kind of points out the placement of your greenhouse. And so greenhouses, the placement of where you put your greenhouse does also affect temperature control, particularly heat. So things that you want to think about: south-facing greenhouses are going to heat up quite nicely. Unfortunately, that was the only place for mine, and so it is a south-facing greenhouse. Southeast is probably a little bit better. So you take advantage of the morning sun, but it protects a little bit from the afternoon heat in the summertime. And then you also want to think about the angle of the sun in the winter, because in a lot of our greenhouses, we use the greenhouse much more in winter if you're using it for veggies and that sort of thing than we do in the summertime. Elongated greenhouses, so you place them north-south, so they get the same amount of light on the east and the west throughout the whole greenhouse. That's another way to think about placement of your greenhouse. And then the last one is thinking about wind, especially if you have a plastic greenhouse. So if you were in a high wind area, you might want to really consider what kind of greenhouse you should have, solid sides versus plastic, that sort of thing. Next slide. So heating, greenhouse heating, same thing, passive versus active. Next slide. So this is a great one for passive heating. All of these barrels are filled with water, and those heat up during the day, and then they release their heat into the greenhouse at night. So that's a great way to think about, using part of your greenhouse without having electricity or heaters or anything like that. You can also do the same thing with masonry. So the lower part of your greenhouse could be brick, or you could put brick along the bottom and the outside, and the bricks heat up in the daytime and then also give off the heat at night. There's all kinds of online charts that you can look at to see, how much masonry versus water, and how much water you would need for a size and that sort of thing. It's a little bit of a calculation if that's all you're going to rely on for your heating. Next slide. And then you consider putting frost cloth or some kind of covering over your plants inside the greenhouse. That's going to give you another couple of degrees, and that may be just enough of what you need. Next slide.
Well, and I was just going to quickly say this was our greenhouse, and it would be high 20s, low 30s outside, inside the greenhouse itself, it would stay hopefully somewhere in the 40s. But underneath this frost cover and with the water in those tanks that had warmed up during the day still radiating heat, it would stay in the mid 50s.
Wow.
So it actually worked, and we were off grid up there, so I wasn't going to put in an electric heater anyhow. So.
That's great. And this is another way too, is have actual raised beds that you can close down those tops inside a hoop house. So that's another great way to help control the heat. Next slide. So this is a real interesting greenhouse. It's up against a house like mine was. Mine was against a garage with a solid wall. This greenhouse is against the house and has actual windows that can open to the house. And that can benefit both the house and the greenhouse. During the day, in cold weather, the greenhouse heats up and it can actually, with the windows open, heat the house as well. And at night, if you chose to, you could leave these windows open and the heat from the house could help heat the greenhouse. So, you could use these in a couple of different ways for cooling, for heating. I thought that was kind of clever the way that was done. Next slide. And of course, heaters. Most heaters are thermostatically controlled. You can actually have, separate thermostats that you can use. So heaters that are labeled for outside use, or the oil type heaters. I have an oil type heater that I've used in my greenhouse on occasion, not so much since it's gotten so old and leaky, but and those work pretty well too. Okay, next slide. So air circulation is super, super important in greenhouses. Next slide. So the fans are an excellent way to keep air circulated. The one on the left, you'll remember from the previous slide, that's from a swamp cooler that you don't have to use the water in that. You can just use the fan element for the swamp coolers, and that helps move air around. Next slide. This is my little funky swamp cooler, and it can be used as just a fan as well without the water in it. And next slide. Roof vents, that helps move heat around, that helps move air circulation. With it, the ceiling vents, the roof vents, you need some other kind of ideally some other kind of vent lower down that's going to bring air in as well, so you can get the circulation. Just having the roof vent open, the only circulation you're going to get is really heat moving out. It's not going to really move air around your plants, which is one of the critical things that we use air circulation for. Next slide. And this is I don't know whose idea this was, but it was a great idea. So this is a little night light, and it's connected to whatever you have plugged in. So you have the night light on, and that allows you to know that whatever you have plugged in is working, and which would be critical at night if your heater went out and you had no idea till the next morning. So I think that was really clever idea with the little nightlight. Next slide. So humidity. So I touched on that with air circulation. Humidity is a real issue with greenhouses. You need to think about what you're going to use your greenhouse for, and Mike touched on that in the beginning. Plants like orchids and other rainforest jungle type plants, they need sufficient humidity levels, and that's really crucial for orchids to get them in bloom. But excess humidity levels, especially if it's in cold weather, can be a real problem with diseases in the greenhouse. Next slide. One way to increase humidity in your greenhouse, if you don't have some other fancy way to do it, is just wet down the gravel. I mean, that certainly is going to get your humidity up. Next slide. So these are some of the issues that you might see if humidity is getting high in your greenhouse. So increasing humidity is something that you want to do early in the day. So your watering should be early in the day, and then think about if you are using it year round, you really need to cut back on your watering in the winter months, because all of us know, you don't need to water as much in the winter as in the summer. Next slide. So here are all those ways, moving air around, vents, that sort of thing. The air circulation does help with the fungal diseases on the foliage. Helps control the humidity as well. Next slide. Pest control. Oh my goodness. Next slide. So all of these pests, most of these are nightmares for all of us in our gardens. But these are the kind of the common pests that you're going to see in greenhouses. Not only the bugs, but the mammals as well. Next slide. Aphids. Aphids can be a nightmare in a greenhouse. They spread absolutely like crazy. These are a whole bunch of different kinds of aphids. Aphids come in all different colors and sizes. Next slide. Aphids literally just explode overnight. So, and this is one of the reasons, is that they can expand so rapidly. So I'm going to harp on this all the way through this section. You've just got to monitor, and take action immediately. It's not one of those things that you can do outside and go, oh man, I got to get to that tomorrow. You find it, you got to get to it that day. Aphids generally, sorry, Mike. So the aphids control the best way, take the plants out, wash them off. I'm going to kind of harp on that, and then we'll talk about other controls at the end. So next slide. So fungus gnats. Fungus gnats are something that are fairly common in greenhouses, and the sticky traps are pretty darn good for fungus gnats. Sticky traps, in my experience, don't work so great outside because they get unsticky with dust and dirt faster than anything else, and they tend to grab onto things like bees and other things that I really don't want to trap on the sticky trap. But in the closed greenhouse, the sticky traps work really well. The gnats lay their eggs in soil. So that's another reason to keep all your soils up off the ground or in containers, and also keep down the green algae that sometimes can grow in a greenhouse. So keeping your greenhouse tidy, we'll talk about that a little bit. That's a great place for fungus gnats to breed, and keep the weeds down and all that in your greenhouse. Next slide. Mealybugs. Oh my gosh. These can get out of control. I mean, you can blink and you've got more of them. So mealybugs can't fly, so they're not flying in. They don't walk very good. So the number one way that you get mealybugs is that you carry them into your greenhouse, unfortunately. They come in on plants, they come in on tools, they come in on pots. So I'm going to harp on this. Inspect your plants before you bring them in the greenhouse. And if you see anything that looks like a bug, get out your magnifying glass and see if it's a bug, because you don't want to introduce any of these bugs into your greenhouse. Next slide. You get this super quick. You get something like this, and you might as well get those plants out of there. You are not going to control these very easily. Spraying with water, take the plant outside, spray with water. You actually can use a diluted alcohol. If you've just got a couple of these guys, you can use a diluted alcohol and actually wipe them off. So that's another way to deal with just a few of them. But obviously, when you get to this kind of level, that's not going to work. Next slide. Spider mites. Spider mites, in my experience, haven't been a real problem in the greenhouse. Spider mites tend to like dry, dusty environments, and that's usually not an issue in a greenhouse, especially if you're using it primarily in the winter, like we do in our climate. but spider mites can be a problem. Inspect your plants, take them outside, wash them off really well. That's kind of one of the main ways to get rid of them. Next slide. Whiteflies, the nemesis of all gardeners. They get in greenhouses. They fly in. They walk in. They on your plants. They can just get overwhelming really fast. So if you've got a plant that's got a whole lot of whiteflies, I would just get that plant out of there for a few weeks until you are convinced you've got it under control. Sprays also work with the whiteflies. So that's a good way to get them washed off your plants. Take your plants outside to wash them off before you bring them back. You want to wait a couple of weeks before you bring whitefly infested plants back in, if at all. Next slide. Sticky traps, they work for whiteflies too. And they actually do work pretty darn well in a greenhouse setting. Next slide. So this is the treatment for almost all of these things. Wash them off, like I said, take them outside, a good stream of water, wash off everything you can see, but then don't think you've solved it. Monitor, because you're probably going to have to wash them off a number of times. You can wipe off some of these, especially the mealybugs, with the swabs, you can do that. You can spray with insecticidal soaps or some of the other organic sprays like neem. There's some herbal sprays that can be recommended. And only as a last resort, use a low toxicity pesticide. You generally don't have to do, if you have some prize orchids or something like that, but in general, most of our plants that we have in this climate in the greenhouse, you could sacrifice one or two to not have to use pesticides and get your pests under control. Next slide. Mammal pests. Oh my gosh. So this beautiful greenhouse on the left is pretty mammalian protected. It's on a slab. It goes all the way to the ground. It's got a solid bottom to the door. So this one, I would be surprised if you would end up with rats, mice, squirrels in this greenhouse. But the one on the right, you certainly could. So that trap certainly, and next slide. This is another one from Mike's greenhouse. He has these shelters basically over his planting beds, over his benches. And these are made of 1/4-inch hardware cloth. And these are great to keep. I mean, there's no way a mouse is getting through 1/4-inch hardware cloth, and they can't choose through it because it's metal. So hardware cloth is basically a screen, but it's a heavy screen and it has bigger holes. So that's kind of what hardware cloth is, and you can buy it in rolls at any hardware store. And he built these frames and then put hardware cloth on these to make sure he was able to keep rodents out. Next slide. Anything you want to add to that, Mike? Sorry, caught you off guard. You're muted.
A bunch of noise. Our main problem with rodents was mice digging up the seeds.
Oh yeah.
But they would chew on the plants too, like this. But yeah, that's a big problem. But yeah.
Yeah.
And this did solve it. So
yeah. Next slide.
Oh, why is it not?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Well, let's take some questions while you're trying.
Oh, good idea.
Okay, isn't a greenhouse to keep the plants warmer in winter? Is it so easy for them to overheat that one needs a lot of cooling?
Well, yes and no. There's our next slide, but let's answer this question. Our winters are not like some people's winters in other parts of the country. I mean, we can have a January day that spikes into the 80s. And yeah, I mean, you could cook your plants on a day like that. So greenhouses and any kind of a hoop, any kind of covering, you really are going to have to monitor and keep, you just monitor what the temperatures are going to be. Just like we do for our plants outside in winter, we monitor what our temperatures are going to be so we protect things that might freeze. In the greenhouse, you may have to throw open all the vents and open the door and have the fans on if the day is going to be really hot. But then you're going to have to remember that you want to close all that down before the sun goes down so you can regain some of that heat that you might need that night. Does that answer the question, I hope?
Yeah. Do you want the second question? There's
Yeah,
only
let's
two.
go ahead.
In lieu of a greenhouse, can you use a medium-size south-facing pot shed if you put wide enough windows around the shed?
Oh, you can use anything. Mike's going to talk about that towards the end, but I mean, you can get, and you will see with some of his slides, you can get as creative as anything. All you need is some kind of frame that holds the cover off of your plants, and that could be a greenhouse. So I think Mike will kind of talk about that and give you some more ideas towards the end.
That's it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. So keeping clutter under control in the greenhouse is a way to protect against some of these rodents, because that clutter, hides them. They can hide in there and then come out and, like Mike said, dig up all your seedlings. So keeping clutter down, keeping your greenhouse cleaned up is, don't use it as a big storage place that you just toss things all winter. Remember that it is a growing area that you want to keep tidy. Next slide. Maybe.
Yeah. There we go. I don't know what's
Okay.
going on.
So this is just another, keep hiding places away so mice and critters can't get in there. So the next slide it just kind of reiterates.
Oops, sorry. There we go.
Yeah, reiterates kind of what I've been saying. So, you want to keep everything clean in your greenhouse. You want to make sure all your plants are bug free. Your pots are bug free. Your tools are bug free when you're bringing them in. If you end up with plants that just get really infested, just get rid of them. Get them out of there. Keep all the doors, windows, and vents screened if possible. Some of those ceiling vents that we showed are a little bit hard if the hinge part goes down into the greenhouse, like that points down from the ceiling of the greenhouse. And those you can just like almost hang a bell of a screen underneath those vents. And I've seen that worked really well. I couldn't find a picture, but that works too. Keep your planting media nice and clean and off the floor. You are going to get pests no matter how diligent and careful you are. So just be prepared. The best way to be prepared is to monitor, so you can jump on it with these ways. I mean, you don't have to have an arsenal of things to use. As long as you've got a hose and water, take your plant out and just squirt it off. Act really quickly, monitor, and then act when you find it. Don't put it off for tomorrow. And please use the least toxic methods last. I mean, the least toxic methods first. Try not to use the toxic methods at all if you can. All righty, next slide. Let's talk a little bit about light in the greenhouse. So part of that is the orientation of your greenhouse. I talked a little bit about that. Fluorescent bulbs work fine. These are fluorescent lights. You want a warm tube and a cool tube to get the good range of light in the greenhouse. But thanks to the cannabis industry, we have so many LED lights that, and they've really come down in price. You can use it. That's okay, Mike. You can use even just a single light fixture and put a grow bulb in it. If you just have a little small little tray of something and you don't want to use a big old long tube light, just use a little small light. You want your light pretty darn close to your plants. I usually use a rule of thumb about 3 to 4 inches from the top of my plants. So there's just a whole lot of lights out there that we can use. But then next slide, then remember that if you're getting too much light on certain plants, you just hang a little shade cloth inside. Wintertime, you're not going to probably want it on the outside. It's going to get all, rain soaked and that sort of thing. But just, hang a little bit of shade cloth on the inside if you're worried about direct light. Next slide. So water use. Next slide. So back to Mike's Nevada City greenhouses. This was so creative. He had, if you'll see in between these 3 houses, the gutters that he installed, and then under those gutters he has barrels that he's collecting water. So that's a great way to, just think outside the box when you're thinking about water conservation, because even in our rainy winter, conservation is, we need to conserve water all year round, and you can use that water to then water your plants inside or other container plants that aren't out in the weather.
Yeah,
Next slide.
It doesn't rain inside your greenhouse, so
Yeah, it does not rain inside. Well, hopefully it doesn't. Mine does a little bit. So, so this is another creative way. See the barrels underneath that bench, and so as the seedlings are watered, the water drains out, from the trays and is collected in those barrels or those little buckets. So that's another clever way. Just, think of ways that you can catch, water runoff. Next slide. And then a sink. This is a fancy greenhouse that has a sink in it. So that's a really cool way. You're watering these plants, and then next slide. And then it drains out and into a bucket outside. It's the perfect gray water setup. So I thought that was really clever as well. So I think we're now up to some questions, if we have any others about venting, water.
There are no questions right
Okay,
now.
great.
Any questions, anyone?
okay, well, maybe they'll come up later. Okay, so now we're going to talk about those options that are a little less elaborate than a greenhouse. May certainly work, especially in our climate. Have some advantages and disadvantages. So, one option on the left there are what are usually called low tunnels, and some sort of hoop supporting some sort of call it a fabric. Could be plastic, could be fabric. This is uh, just row cover here, which is polyester. That certainly works. This was kind of a higher tech plastic, and then regular plastic. This one actually breathed. This was just, UV stabilized plastic, which means if you do that, you've got to have a way to vent it, just like we've been talking about with greenhouses. These 2 options will vent themselves. This one, you'd have to be there to roll it up or take it off or something, or you're going to end up with parboiled vegetables earlier than you want. Then over here, something certainly more elaborate, a little more work would be this kind of a hot frame, but again, vented with these windows here. And hopefully, you can find used windows. It doesn't have to be all new and look quite this nice, but you can find salvaged lumber, used windows, so you can certainly come up with something as functional as this. But this is beautiful. And if you want something like this, great. And they're very, very useful in our climate, do just fine. This probably doesn't work. These little cloches haven't been really shown to be that effective. even in our climate. But Treva's used the wall of water, and so anecdotally, I think her report is this seems to be effective. You fill these up with water, they heat up during the day and radiate some heat at night. You could cover this somehow with a cover and hold more of that heat in if you wanted to.
Yeah, I use
Wool,
these mainly at the beginning of the season because they do actually warm the soil, a little bit. And so I have cheated and gotten my tomatoes and not my peppers, but my tomato plants, I've gotten in maybe a week to 2 weeks sooner than I would have. The trick with these is getting them off and not destroying your plant. So you definitely need two people, 4 hands to grab the corners of these to get them off. So
yeah, they are
they're
sort
not
of
perfect.
yeah, they're sort of notorious for collapsing down on top of your plants.
Yes, and if you have cats in your neighborhood, I would not recommend these because
Okay.
cats, for whatever reason, are attracted to clawing these.
Okay. So advantages and disadvantages, but
Yeah,
give
yeah,
you an
probably
early
more.
start on your tomatoes. You want bragging rights, being the first one in the neighborhood with your ripe tomatoes. There's
That's right. That's
one
right.
option there. Um, so again, this picture from before, but just shows you, some of the options. I mean, we probably don't need, hot water heating in the soil in our climate. Some climates they do. But again, these low tunnels are certainly useful here. And, something a little more elaborate, this cold frame, but also really would be very helpful here and might be all you need. Um, this is a little experiment that I did in Grass Valley with these lettuces were under a tunnel, a low tunnel, probably, I think it was probably just polyester row cover, and these were just out in the open. So again, different climate, but a pretty good, same planted the same time, same varieties. And lettuces are pretty tough, but they are affected by cold. So just gives you an idea of how effective just a very simple low tunnel can be. Here are just some cold frame options. Again, these are pretty elaborate. This one's interesting though. I mean, this is just straw bales to make the frame very well insulated, obviously. Just a window kind of on top. And then they happen to have this on a bed of manure, which as it decomposed, it would give off heat. So that would heat that area even more. I don't know if that'd be necessary here, but I think it's a fascinating use of a natural resource to get a little heat and start your plants a little better.
Wow.
But straw bales are actually very useful, and you could put these, two long and one wide. Didn't have to be this small. So anyhow, just an option. Here's another one with a top. And this top looks like screening, so this could be used either plastic or row cover or shade cloth to shade like early starts in the spring when it's still too hot and they're going to suffer from direct sun. So
Yeah, Mike, this is
multi-use.
my lettuce bed, and um I use screening early in the season because of those darn white crowned sparrows that is the
Ah,
nemesis of all of our little tiny plants. And so I have screen, but then if I'm worried about, it getting cold, I just throw a frost cloth over it. So it works really well.
yeah, good. Yeah. Yeah. So there's another thing that we haven't, and we will, haven't talked about yet, but is pest protection. So this is what Treva was doing to keep the sparrows off, but you can also use the row cover to protect your plants if you seal it down on the edges from white cabbage butterflies, any number of other insects you may be trying to keep out. And you can use a very, very thin type of row cover. They come in different thicknesses. But if you're going to be doing it for some winter cold protection, you probably want to use well, they're like rated at percentage of light they cut off, but it means they're heavier. So like a 30 would cut off 30% of the light, but be heavy enough to give you a little bit of protection. And they go up to 50, 60, even 70, I think. Although I'm not sure that would be necessary here, but just so you know that they come in different thicknesses. So you can do this, this was just a garden bed with polycarbonate 4x8 sheet that I threw over it, and you just pull it back. Not as nice as the one Treva had there, but it worked. Yeah, just different options. This is some of the hoop materials you can make. These aren't great pictures, but you can just go down to the hardware store, the nursery, and buy these metal rods, if you will, that are flexible, and you just bend them down and stick them in the ground, and you've got as long as you want, hoops. This one here, I think, actually was rebar. If you take a piece of rebar, like 1/4 inch, it could even be a little heavier, and you bend it around a 5-gallon barrel, it comes out just about right to span a 4-foot wide bed. So that's another option. This was more trampoline frame pieces that I was using. And then what I've often gone to is plastic pipe for a permanent kind of setup. And you can use the joints, and you have a straight side. This is another option, but as you can see here, a number of different options from big to small for hoop houses or low tunnels. If you're going to use the plastic pipe and you have a raised bed, even a short one, you can just fix it to the side, and then you can use that same straight, it's not going to be in the way if you have nothing on it. You can use it in the wintertime with the row cover on it, and you can use it in the early spring or even the summer with shade cloth on it. So it's multi-use. If you don't have a raised bed, again, this isn't a great picture, but this is a piece of rebar, and get like 18, 20-inch piece of rebar, pound it into the ground 10 inches, and then you just stick your pipe on top of that, your plastic pipe, and then bend it over to one on the other side. And you've got the makings of a low tunnel, and which you can just take down when you're not using it. One of the things, and Treva mentioned wind, and it certainly affects the low tunnels. If you're in a high wind area, if you connect them with a bar across the top, they're going to be a lot stronger. Otherwise, a high wind can just could blow them over one by one if really just have them just kind of stuck into the ground. Not as much if you've got them, screwed onto a bed here, but even then it's a lot stronger if you have a top bar. So I started talking about the different materials, and again, you've got row cover, which is the simplest, cheapest, probably the most available. The UV plastic is just as easily available. But again, there you've got to worry about it heating up too much during the day on a sunny day. And I mean, even if it's 40 degrees out, if you're in a sunny, direct sun, it's going to heat up too much unless you vent it some. And this stuff was quite expensive. It was called diobetylon. I think it's still available, but it's very interesting. It's a plastic material, but it's also vented, so it'll vent. And then the interesting thing about the row cover in those days were probably colder than it usually gets here, but you have any frost, it seals the little holes, and so then it works even more efficiently on a really cold day when you had some frost. The other thing other than heat that these do is they do keep frost off the plants, and frost directly on the plants does its own damage, not just the cold, but the little ice crystals could actually puncture the cell walls and make it easier for the plant to dehydrate, which is really what kills them in the cold is dehydration. So just because the cell walls are either bursting because they've frozen or just because of the frost. So keeping the frost off in itself is a big advantage, even if it doesn't get down below freezing. And frost can form at 37 degrees, so we can still get that from time to time. And the other thing, advantages and disadvantages like this diabetalon, you can see through it. You can see the plants, but the row cover you can't. And it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. You don't may not think about it, may not be watching them as much. They may get a pest infestation under there, and you don't look under there for a few days, and all of a sudden you've got more of a problem. So that's one of the advantages of the clear covers over the row cover. Although this, as I said, in pretty much all ways works just fine. There's a number of ways to fasten the covers down. There are these clips that are made, specifically for fastening cover to plastic pipe. These binder clips, the largest size binder clips are the ones that I like the best. They're the easiest to get on and off. And you can use them on multiple sized, hoop material. Here, this idea is to show the benefit of hooking it down on the sides. Really cold climates, you definitely want to do that. Just keep the cold from seeping under there. But here again, if you're using it for pest protection, you want to be able to hook it down on the sides, either with a board here, it can be dirt, rocks, whatever, just to seal it down. So then the opposite way of looking at this is shade cloth. And again, these hoops can be used for shade cloth. Treva, I don't know when you use yours in the spring mostly. You're muted, I think. Treva, I think you're muted.
Just got the little notice.
Yeah.
I use that box pretty much all year round. So I use a
Okay.
lot of shade cloth on it too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so it can be all year round. It can be, again, if you put out a lot of plants, even the ones that like some sun in the, mid-spring when we're putting them out, they need a little protection from the direct sun on a hot day when you've just planted them to give them a week or two to get settled in. So shade cloth can be really helpful for that. I found that the 50% shade cloth, and this is just anecdotal, I don't know of any study, but 50% shade cloth seems to be, kind of in the sweet spot where it lets in enough light that the plants do okay, but it cuts out enough direct sunlight and heat to give them, again, a chance to start. And again, you can get multiple thicknesses, if you will, of the shade cloth rated on how much light it lets in or cuts out. And this was Treva's long bed of, I think, lettuces. Was that what it?
No, I don't even remember what that was. I think that was cucumbers, and it was at the beginning of the season. We were going to have
Okay.
a really hot day.
Yeah.
So I have these just wire hoops that, and then you can just throw whatever material you need, over it. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then this is burlap of some sort. So it doesn't have to be shade cloth. I mean, it certainly does the job to give those plants a day or two or a week and enough light. This design didn't really work, as you can see, late in the day, but you can hang a piece of shade cloth here if you don't want to use the hoops, and then you'll probably get enough protection. So this is the other way to use it. These are pepper plants, young pepper plants, and just a vertical piece of shade cloth to the west will protect them from, the worst sun, which is the heat of the day, west facing sun or west, afternoon sun. So this works. And this is something I do with berries. We have a variety of blackberries one of the thornless varieties that tends to come on a lot later. You know, a lot of them are April, May. This one is more like June. And when it's hot and the berries will sunburn, but they do just fine under the shade cloth. So just, you know, this is really just laid on top of them. I think I have a couple of posts here to kind of hold it up in front, but really just laid on top. So just another use of shade cloth. Okay, in conclusion, all the things we've said. Enjoy it, keep them clean. You know, the what you have to do to maintain temperature and air circulation, but can certainly be fun and add just a lot to your gardening experiences to have a greenhouse or some of the other, you know, shade cloth options, low tunnels, that kind of thing. Any other questions, Joan?
Yes. Um, yes. I may have missed it if you already mentioned location, but it would be helpful to know where the best location is in your garden is to put your greenhouse.
Well, I did mention that, and maybe you put your question in before. So southeast are ideal. If you have an area, if you're blessed with some shade to the west, you know, would be ideal as well. I think we've made it clear that the biggest caveat to having greenhouses in our climate is controlling the heat. So if you are primarily going to use your greenhouse in the winter, it's not as big an issue as if you want to use your greenhouse in the summer as well. So just think about when you're going to use your greenhouse and consider that the light is different in winter versus summer that will hit your greenhouse. And you'll just have to kind of look at you know, your own property. But generally, you want your greenhouse southeast.
Are you going to discuss potting soil? Any special consideration related to greenhouses?
I don't think there's, I mean, good quality potting soil. I mean, we actually have a couple of presentations that you can get to online in the Yolo Master Gardener website about starting plants. And I don't think there's any special considerations if you're doing it in a greenhouse. I don't know, Treva, what do you?
No, I don't think so either. Just
Okay.
you know, keep your soils off the ground.
Can you use old sheets to cover a frame? If so, should it be white or a light color?
Well, the thing about a sheet, so if you're putting it over a low tunnel, is that's going to shut out a lot of light, and it's not going to have any venting to speak of. So sheets can be used for frost protection, but I don't think you could use them long term the way you can the row cover, because they're just, you know, especially if you have them kind of close to the ground or sealed down on the ground, they're not going to vent and they're going to block out probably too much light, I think.
And they also do get wet, even if it's not raining, you know, the moisture in the air. And so you have to make sure your support structure is good.
Yeah.
Are there any non-plastic alternatives to low tunnel covers?
Good question. Yes, because even the row cover is spun polyester and it's a plastic. Well, Treva had the burlap for essentially shade.
Yeah, I use the burlap a lot, but I use it for shade. It doesn't, I mean, it doesn't do anything for warmth, I don't think. I've never considered using it for warmth. Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know of any alternative, unfortunately.
I mean, I think that the frost cloths I have had for eons. And if you know, you take care of them and store them, you know, well, I mean, those frost cloths last a long, long time.
Yeah. And that's right. You do need to take care of them or they won't. But yes, I've had some of mine for 20 years.
Hmm.
So they will last if you take care of them. Good point.
Last question. How do you deal with root mealybugs?
Your area, Treva.
So I think the question would be, are these really root mealybugs or are these root aphids? Because I've been tricked, thinking they were mealybugs and they're really aphids. Um, Mealybugs come in soil, probably, or on plants. So I would be really careful with, where your plants are coming from. That doesn't explain what to do once you have them. Um, I don't know specifically if neem, one of the biological oils that are, like use it as a drench. I don't know I truly, I'm afraid I don't know that answer.
Well, I happen to have root mealy bugs in my beans this year. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a root mealy bug. I mean, they look like the regular mealy bugs, if you will, the pictures that Treva showed, although they're in the soil on the roots. I have no idea how I got them. They pretty much decimated my beans, so I pulled them up and I solarized the soil, which is a
Hmm.
recommended treatment for them. And I guess jury's out as to whether or not it worked, but I have fava beans coming up in that bed now. Or actually, they've been there for a couple of months now, and they seem to be doing fine.
Hmm.
So that, knock on wood, but that may have worked. But that is one potential treatment that seemed to work. But it did mean pulling the beans out and not putting anything else in there that, I wanted to try to save necessarily. And yeah, there, who knew?
And you can check online on how to solarize. You're not going to be able to do that in the winter.
No, I'm sorry. No, you can't do that in the winter. This was probably by June or yeah, probably by the end of June, I had pulled my beans out. So at that point, I was able to solarize for a couple of months.
One last question just came in. Couldn't one attach a roller system for the shade frost cloth to the hinge side on the hinge side of the window?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's all kinds of fancy rollers that you can do.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
Good
it.
creative idea.
There's no more questions, but you did have 56 attendees.
Great.
Whoa.
That was our highest number yet.
Yeah, nice
Oh,
rainy
good.
day. Love it.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad people are interested. So, a couple of things for the people that are left. First, if you haven't heard Treva before, we're going to try to get her to come back next month or next year at some point. But also, Treva does a garden talk every first Saturday. So look on the Yolo website and find the link for that. And you can hear her once a month because she has a tremendous amount of information to share.
Thank you,
Um,
Mike. Thanks for the
yeah.
plug.
So this is the last session for this year. Next 2 weeks from now is Thanksgiving. And happy holidays, everybody. Enjoy December. And actually, the first session in January is going to be on the 8th. And Janie Santos, who, if you haven't heard her before, you're in for a treat. And if you have, you know how good her presentations are. Janie's going to be talking about starting a garden from scratch, so appropriate for the new year. And whether you're starting with something bare bones or revising an existing garden, Janie's going to have a lot of good advice on just how to do that. So mark your calendars for January 8th. Um, Happy holidays, everybody, and we'll see you in January.
Okay. Bye. Thank
Bye.
Thanks, Joan.
you.